He required that that funeral ceremony be carried out by the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, and he required that that ceremony be free from religious input.
He knew exactly what he wanted at all times. And so too in death, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union had the responsibility of carrying out the last wishes of C.L.R. James, that he be buried here in Trinidad and that the union be responsible for those arrangements. We are deeply honored by his request of us, and we trust that the celebration of a life which we have all come here today for will be a fitting and appropriate tribute to this great, great man.
And in the period that he lived in the United States, he lived some of that time in Harlem and learned from that experience. He met auto workers in Detroit and learned from them. He was a teacher who learned and a learner who taught. And the two together created a unique and distinct political philosophy and attitude toward the world. Years before anyone heard of Martin Luther King Jr., C.L.R. James helped to organize sharecroppers in the cotton fields of southeast Missouri. Long before, in the late 60s, the modern women's movement was created. We in our organization, helped immensely by the work of Selma James, understood that the question of women was more than the traditional view of equal pay for equal work.
He asked about Jesse Jackson and his prospects in the American presidential campaign. Harding gave, stage by stage, an account of Jackson's rise to prominence. And then C.L.R. said, that old characteristic circle of the hand, I have been following his rise, but tell me, does he know where he is going to land?
I represent on this platform today a body of people, young, black, men and women, who spent the last 10 years, day after day after day, looking after C.L.R. James. And C.L.R. spent equally the last 10 years looking after them. You see, any relationship forged in the heat of revolt has the possibility of a lasting relationship. And in 1981 or thereabouts, when young blacks decided they were no longer to be constrained by official society in Brixton, they set on fire every major city in the United Kingdom. And C.L.R. discovered this body of young black people in the heat of that revolt. They needed him, and he needed them. And something strange happened after that. I listened to George Lamming talking about a generation of African lawyers and so on who came to see him. In the last 10 years, they appeared to be dwindling, and a whole host of young black people, from John O'Groats to Land's End, came into his home every single day of his life. I know no one over 40 in the United Kingdom who had such an intimate window upon a completely new generation of people with new concerns and with less complaint and more decision to solve their own problems as has C.L.R. James. I know no one, I repeat, over 40 who shared moments of a 20-year-old person seeking to buy a mortgage, a young woman grappling with a hairstyle. He knew it well without intruding. That was James in the last 10 years of his life.
I came to Britain in 1985, a little-known Jamaican poet on the invitation of an independent black organization. This led me into a day-to-day closeness with CLR James. It's not important here that this happened to me. What is important is that CLR lived in a way that made it possible. It meant knowing what he wanted to eat, his silent days, his days of demands, his favorite roses and poems. I spent weeks dusting and cataloging his books and was there all of the evening before he died and was called shortly after on the day of his death. Some hours later, I wrote this poem, On Your Passing, for CLR. You left me on a day of doubts. For once, your sun-sharp answers did not cut through my clouds. I sent my love upstairs, did not dare come. From the landing, I could smell your passing, an old-time smell, a smell of changes and hard cedar, a smell you find in families and friends. And even now, I am not struck by absence. You filled your time so well, a drop from the overflow could quench a thirsty mind for years to come.